Welcome to the SWRS Reading Series, a podcast for readers, writers, and readers curious about writers. I'm your host, Alita Winternheimer. This week on the SWRS Reading Series, author Laura James brings us Stuck, followed by our conversation about being an expat, writing an entire novel during complete lockdown in the south of Spain, and what it means to drift aggressively through life. The audio quality on today's podcast is really good, but it might be just a little bit shy of great, of what we really strive for at the SWRS podcast. And, well, that's because Laura is coming to us from the south of Spain. She actually left home and went to a friend's apartment. She told me it is the apartment with the best Wi-Fi, best connectivity in town. With that in mind, I know you're going to really enjoy this podcast. Now, here's Laura James reading Stuck.
If I were a better person, I would be in New York right now. But I am unimpressive and pleased to be alone in Charles de Gaulle, an airport no finer than any other, but offering occasional whiffs of bread and tartines from the cafes and off the backs of passers-by. New York reeked. I wanted to leave long before I did. It may be hard to understand why New York City, arguably the capital of the world, was so unsettling. I could describe how it had me grinding my teeth at night. My acupuncturist told me that was why I had neck pain and sometimes felt an awful popping inside my head in which I was sure something ruptured, because I felt the hot blood fall down the inner walls of my skull. I could also tell you about the degree I earned under collapsing classroom ceilings and the reporting gig that made me seem like someone who cared, or the gray infrastructure built in every direction to hide all things natural. But you will only understand how ugly it was if you've ever been in one of those terribly sour moods, the kind you can't snap out of, even when someone buys you breakfast or tries to make you laugh, even when you want nothing more than to laugh it off, but the mood is dead set. Someone greater would have coped. They would have shaped New York City into a serviceable home. Fed up and run down, I fled from that fort. My suitcase dropped violently onto the baggage carousel. I winced. It is carrying a very breakable bottle of Rioja for Alessio, my friend and host. Paris is not so random of a destination since he is here. We were roommates in New York last year after he responded to my apartment listing. I imagine we never got together because he had a girlfriend at the time. Otherwise, I could have made it happen. We were together during an unusual stretch of time in which I was going to an intense boot camp before classes, gaining toughening and energetic courage. Plus, Alessio and I were both Italian, me half and Alessio full, and got along swimmingly. We made homemade ravioli together on our days off. He said, "You're the best roommate I've ever had." That line was my runway. From there, I took off. I fantasized that we would always live in that apartment together. We would adopt a lot of plants, giving them a better life than other Manhattanites could, because Alessio and I were careful beings, and fortunate to have windows on 3 walls. We would call the place our peninsula. We would rain that sun-soaked peninsula in sculpted nudity. Our love would gain such a luminous strength that it would compete with the light blessed onto our land. Our plants, confused as to what energy to photosynthesize, would grow both towards us and the windows. The endless and lawless growth of our kingdom would be the one thing we could not control. Meanwhile, I knew that the runway, him liking me as a roommate, was not enough ground for flight. It was just a strip of level ground, likely concrete. Alessio moved out and we never took in a single plant together. As far as I know, he is girlfriendless now. If the Rioja bottle broke, the wine is already seeping through my clothing. No point interfering now. If the Tempranillo has already dyed everything, it's a sign that my intentions will stain my composure. I shoulder my beefy backpacking pack and text Alessio on my way out of the terminal. Leaving CDG, see you soon. The entrance to the Charles de Gaulle metro station is blocked by blue and white striped tape and a sign that reads, Fermeture de la station. Alessio warned me that the metro would be on strike, but I didn't keep that information in mind. Here I am, empty-headed. Anything will do. I follow the bus symbol on overhead signage until I reach ticketing machines. There are only 4 bus lines, but one looks to go in the direction I need. For the rude price of 17 euros, I get a ticket and join a horde of people on the curbside waiting for buses. When we landed, the pilot announced it was 0 degrees, which is about the only Celsius I know. The freezing cold smells clean. I pull out my copy of Expand Your Spanish. On the chapter titled From Bad to Worse, I'm learning how to say that things are lousy with every part of speech. Worse, to worsen, worsening. Peor, empeorarse, un empeoramiento. My Spanish itself could be worse. It's actually improving tremendously, although that's good for nothing here. I don't know a lick more than the first page words of a beginner's French book. Even those taste odd. A high-floor coach pulls up, and the crowd and I eagerly watch passengers stagger out and tug their suitcases from the luggage compartment mounted below. I prep to throw my pack in the spaces they leave free, but the driver shuts the compartment before I'm able. He climbs back onto the bus while shouting some French and drives away without letting anyone else board. The crowd breaks into an enraged mob. Their curses, sighs, and tisking tongue clicks indicate that I should be bitter too, but I haven't spent much time waiting. I have more to squander. I set my bag back down to the sidewalk and reopen Expand Your Spanish. Within 15 minutes, there is another bus. Like the first, it is overcrowded, but it is able to accept a few of the loudest mob members. I don't push. I'm left behind. It's hard to focus on learning Spanish after the second bus leaves. The chapter ends with Peor imposible. What could not be worse is the stress closing in on me. While I wait on the third bus, every minute squeezes me tighter, like labor contractions in reverse, giving death, not birth, a worsening, until a response from Alessio. Yes, but I'm at my office holiday party tonight. I will get back pretty late. Maybe you'll be asleep. I'm sending instructions on how to get into the building and a photo of where I left the spare keys. Without him waiting on me, I have even more time to squander. I may also have enough to shower the tenseness off before he can see or smell me. Coolly, I force entry onto the third bus. I take a seat in one of the last rows and watch the backs of necks, the ones not covered by scarves and drooping winter hats. The ride's turns and bumps ruffle the white skin of their collars like accordions. They play a meditative tune. Up against all of these necks, I am tan. My leather is product of a couple of months spent living in the south of Spain. My neighbors in Almeria delight in saying that we get the most hours of sunshine in all of Europe. I've definitely never been tanner, though my annoying red pigmentation still flames through. The Spanish have an expression to use when someone blushes. You're turning into a tomato. When I am around, and probably even when I'm not, my coworkers laugh and say, you're turning into a Leah. Leah, they say, instead of my name, Leah. I don't mind. Nor do I mind that they call me a guiri, a white foreigner. It's obvious with my blonde hair, refusal to wear athleisure, and American accent when speaking Spanish. I'm a sore thumb in Paris, too. That is, if the rumor I've heard about French women is to be believed. I'll stick out for not being devilishly pretty, skinny, or chic. But my hair is cut in a cute bob, which I tell myself is very Parisian. I only have a week to attract attention. I'm on holiday. Since leaving New York in August, I've been teaching English at an all-boys academy in Almeria, which is now closed from mid-December to early January, and by Spanish custom is paying me through the break. After 4 months away from home, I can admit things are objectively wonderful. My alarm each morning has a nice ring to it, and I have 3-day weekends, allotted time for traveling or nursing Thursday night hangovers. When I walk into my classroom, my students applaud, and the younger boys tell me they love me, and the older boys ask when I'll be coming to their parties, which never gets old. They have never met someone from New York City before, so I guess I am a sort of celebrity. Certainly, they have never had a teacher who rides a skateboard to work, wears a jean jacket with an Amsterdam marijuana patch, and plays chess with them during the midday break. And certainly not one who tells them about being suspended in high school for cheating and wish she'd focused on something other than perfect grades, something that would have ended up mattering. With the teachers, I'm an excited storyteller over morning coffee. They appreciate that I'm eager to learn how they each make their tortillas de patatas, willing to be made fun of for my mispronunciations, and I suspect generally good at teaching. Despite the ease, on some days I wake up from my siesta feeling overworked. I'm tired without reason. Almeria seems stale when it is fresh. I've already gotten to know it all, so I escape again. To burrow into unfamiliarity, I take buses to arbitrary old villages or fly to Paris. I don't know where I am heading, but the display on the front of this bus indicates that we are going to Paris, Gare de Lyon, an ambiguous point that looked somewhat near Alessio's neighborhood. I couldn't care less. Getting lost is no threat to someone running away or to someone with a smartphone and an address. Almost an hour after leaving the airport and nearing 10 o'clock at night, the bus stops and opens its doors. One of the first to disembark, I realize only after beginning to pull my bag from the luggage compartment that all but 2 other passengers remained on the bus. Drastically outnumbered, I get the impression that getting off the bus was a misstep, but it's too late to turn back. The bus leaves me in its dust. When it settles, I see red. Helium pink, krypton silvery white, and xenon pale blue too. The neon lights of Paris fall on everything. They fall on closed shops and open restaurants, with red awnings decked in garland. The only pocket of cold white light is from a rundown corner bar, casting its crisp sobriety through open windows, gallery-like. But even this place is luring with its skinny bar shelves along the outdoor walls, where gentlemen sporting inflated coats and caps sip from balloon-shaped glasses filled with what could be cognac. The putty I melted into during the stuffy bus ride now freezes within minutes into a solid figure. I take out my phone to check the map, and even my slight arm and hand movements are stiff. Another message from Alessio. All good, Lee? Did you make it home? The map says I am a 42-minute walk from making it home. It offers a public bus option, but having had my faith in public transportation shaken, I decide to go on foot. Yes, I'm in, I message. Amazing, he responds. I do not want to worry Alessio with my tale of delays. It would be rude to disturb someone who is enjoying his night and imbibing on company cash, especially when that someone is doing a favor and letting me stay at his place. As long as I make it home before he does, my lie is of no consequence. To both Alessio and myself, the time between my lie and my eventual truthfulness is negligible. Anyway, the walk is by no means noteworthy. It loses loveliness as I move into a modern shopping district, commercial and boring. I become more sleepy-headed. My backpack weighs heavier on all the wrong parts of my back. It's from a camping store I visited in New York. The sales lady had advised me that a proper backpack should feel weightless, or at the very most, like you've gained a few pounds of gut. I gave her good money for this ill-advised burden. I try to push my very physicality out of mine. My surroundings go with it. I pass a toy shop with a window display of jiggling Christmas trinkets, and then this avenue, somewhere in East Paris, becomes a peripheral hum. A fantasy gets to occupying my mind. It's hard to see past it. I see myself. I am the heart, a cardiac organ. My body is the world as I know it. The tissue that fastens the heart to the body vanishes, one cell at a time until it's unattached. I am freed from the chore of circling blood. I float, touching nothing, throbbing alone. I pressed into the air, something non-existent anyways. Air is potential, waiting to be filled. I hold my breath so as to not absorb any of it. I am kicked by some imperceptible force and sent flipping through the potential. I don't feel anything. The body reconstructs without me. An artificial heart, bionic and better functioning, takes my place. It will never fail. How ideal it would be to flip through space painlessly while the body carries on without me. I guess that's what I'd like to accomplish on my holiday here in Paris. I want to disappear. Yet, I don't want to disappear. I'd like to exist in near isolation, Alessio staying with me, not cease to exist. The states of living and dying are too active. I'm desperate for passivity. I might be well on my way to realizing this fantasy. It's not like anyone really wanted to keep me from spending Christmas in Paris without family or close friends. No one from my life in New York or from my new one in Almeria gave me an ultimatum or blocked the flight booking sites on my browser. Through the course of my flight, connective tissue was pulled upon, and the body showed that it could let me go. As I carry on right now, everyone I know is undoubtedly carrying on, completely unaffected by my onset isolation, seeking my replacement. I arrive at the apartment unexpectedly. Horribly, I must remain mobile. I am a player in an escape the room video game, except the goal is to enter the room. Before Alessio returns home, I have to work out the clues he texted me to solve the puzzling intricacies of this century-and-a-half-old Haussmann building. But I struggle to figure out the correct combination of numbers and symbols on the street front door keypad, and then on the subsequent keypad for the useless door immediately following the first. It would be disastrous if he comes back later to find me outside, incapable of navigating a classic Parisian building, especially since he is under the impression that I'm already inside. My disarray is tragicomic when held up to Alessio's absolute put-togetherness. I've never seen him attempt something without success, except the time his pasta dough kept cracking when he fed it through the roller. He hid his face as if my witnessing stripped him of his Italian ancestry, and he didn't want to be seen without it. I took pleasure in his brief discomposure. It was cute. My being in Paris for 4 hours without getting my shit together, and then lying about having my shit together, is less than cute. Following his instruction, I go down the long corridor of his lobby and exit it through a door at the end into an interior courtyard. A botanical oasis with potted plants of all sizes and vines that wrap around a canopy of Christmas lights, the space is shared by the backsides of 4 identical buildings. I studied the photo Alessio sent. The plant he hid his keys under has wide and white trimmed leaves. I'm no botanist. Besides the wall ivy, all these plants kind of look the same. If anyone is watching me from a window above, they see just my oily hair poking out from under my oversized backpack, like a turtle's from its shell, peeking slowly into these nicely wintered garden plants. The white trimmed leaves, as promised, under the raised pot, the keys. Of the 3 on the ring, none work on the nearest door, nor any door in the courtyard. I am doing something very wrong. There is no way Alessio would leave a set of keys without one for his building's door. I hate this game. It's fucking freezing, my nose is dripping, and the back of the hand is hardly an absorbent tissue. Perhaps, just maybe, I am desperate enough to ask for Alessio's help. Bonsoir. A middle-aged man in a heavy wool coat holds a key card up to the intercom, and the door clicks open. On my keyring, I notice the small black key card that I overlooked, assuming it was a purposeless tag. Sometimes I am nothing less than an idiot. As the man holds the door open for me, I ogle his pinstripe suit. My mind had reserved this costume for womanizing Wall Street bankers in the 80s, but this man was equal, with his thick, rimmed glasses pushing into the mushy skin of his under eyes. If he can represent the rest of Alessio's neighbors, I'll have to up my elegance to live here. The elevator is too tight for the 2 of us plus my pack, so the man waves me to go first. Merci, I smile. He nods and checks his watch before the doors enclose me in the oversized dumbwaiter that takes me to the top floor. The apartment door recognizes one of the keys and swings open into a dark space. I breathe in relief. And leather skies, the same rich and hedonistic cologne Alessio wore in New York. The apartment is refined, albeit masculine, with sleek woods, grays, and blues. The entry room is a modest living area, opening up to a kitchen on its left, separated by a high-stooled breakfast bar. To its right is the bedroom, partitioned by a short mahogany bookshelf and an overhanging floor lamp with a large and bulbous mirror shade, in which the whole studio is reflected in fichette. The bedroom houses a Talman digital piano, although Alessio never mentioned playing, and a boarded-up fireplace. I unclip my pack and leave it near the bed, take off my shoes and jacket in the living room, and find that a cold sweat left me smelling vinegary. I light the tobacco-scented candle on the coffee table. When Alessio moved into my apartment in New York, he had to comply with my style, eclectic and colorful, or rather, the free decor I collected off curbs and Craigslist. Envisioning his own place, I suspected exactly this. He has framed and evenly hung paintings on every wall, fruits in the kitchen, abstract faces in the living room, splatterings and splashes in the bedroom. There are double closets in both the living and bedroom with mirrored doors, enlarging the space. It all seems to me too sharp and tidy for having been lived in. I've come to terms with his preference for the unseasoned and ultra-modern. We don't have to have similar tastes. I'll budge. Alessio left a note on the kitchen island. The handwriting is rushed print, strung together like cursive. Each word slants in a different direction, as if they were pasted from different pages, written on separate days or with interchanging hands. Hey, Lee. It's great to have you here in Paris. Looking forward to seeing you and catching up tomorrow after I get off work. I left a couple of towels for you in the bedroom so that you can take a shower. A couple of things. The bed is for you. The sofa is a convertible and I'm sleeping there. I am coming back very late, so don't you dare be on the couch when I am back. Feel free to use, eat anything you want. Be careful only with the toilet. You should put only toilet paper, otherwise a class. I will see you tomorrow evening and we can catch up. A pronto, Alessio. I flip over the note and doodle myself holding a large bottle of wine in front of the Eiffel Tower. From my pack, I pull the Magnum of Rioja, unscathed, and place it above my drawing. I write, and when I had given thanks, I almost broke it and said, take, drink. This is my wine, which is almost broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Alessio might not pick up on the New Testament paraphrase, but at least I've entertained myself. While it could be problematic to assume the role of Christ at the Last Supper, it's a fitting act, choosing a disciple that I know will have me killed and forgiving his betrayal even before he commits it. I should quit blasphemy. I'm not holy. In an investigation to Alessio's life, I discover sweets in the cabinet, fruits and vegetables and cheeses in the fridge, and baguettes in the freezer. Freezing store-bought bread is an odd choice when the fresh stuff is so accessible in this country. As I've been led to believe, it is nearly shoved down your throat at every corner. But I don't judge. Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind sits on top of the shelves, bookmarked. I know the book. It goes over all the ways psychedelics can improve our lives. I haven't needed convincing, so I haven't read it. In New York, I waited for Alessio to go away for a weekend so I could trip ask with a friend. I told Alessio what I had done only afterwards. I tried to explain how I hadn't wasted the weekend, but I couldn't make him believe. I wasn't able to say how psychedelics had improved my life. Probably because I hadn't read the book, and Alessio had never experimented. I can't imagine that has changed. I smile at the thought of him preparing for my arrival by reading How to Change Your Mind and wanting to change his mind enough to understand mine. I move on. His closets are sparse, besides the coat closet, which barely closes with all of its winter offerings. In an organizer on the living room table, there is a Ziploc with a half-smoked joint. The weed surprises me, but the way he organized it tells me Alessio hasn't strayed far from the man I got to know. He has a surround sound system. I'm quick to connect my phone and put on some French jazz at a low volume since it's late. Earlier this year, when Alessio accepted a Parisian job offer and moved out of my New York apartment, I underwent a similar investigation. For a while after he was gone, I uncovered fossils of him all throughout the apartment. Miscellaneous things that he left behind. Potted plants on windowsills, euro coins on closet floors, A Chagall print rolls under the bed, and in the bathroom cabinet, an unopened box containing a lavish men's razor. It cost the price of 50 of my wimpy razors that I normally bought. With his, I had never before seen smooth legs for many months. Alessio was a breed of straight man I had never come across before. I hang one of the provided towels on the heated drying rack in his bathroom before stepping into the shower. Using each of his ritual of samurai gels and soap, I imagine them turning me into a Japanese warrior. My razor is a sword. As I shave my body, my movements precise. On an overhead cut, I hit my hand against the shower head and decide that's enough. Opening the shower door shoots the hairs I spared off of my body until I wrap myself in a warm towel. I make the couch up for Alessio with the linens I find in the bedroom closet before crawling into his bed. The sheets are soft and the mattress absorbent. I hit the switch on the jazz. The silence hits a switch on me. I wake when Alessio gets back, although I pretend to be in an undisturbed sleep, even when he steps into the bedroom to check that I am there. He must be drunk. When we used to live together, I was the clumsy stomper and he was weightless. But tonight, even slipping into the pre-made couch is a loud affair. After a few smacks and knocks, he hushes. When I wake up next, it is from a woman's voice. She says, "Good morning. Alessio brought someone home from the party? They slept on the couch I made up together. This is a nightmare. It has to be." She goes on speaking, and I have no choice but to listen. She tells Alessio what the day's weather will be, reads the headlines of the top 3 current events, and then does that all again in French. The weather is still crappy, and the world is still nonsensical, and I am relieved to hear so from a voice without flesh. The blinds were left open, so the apartment is bright. Still sleepy, I stay in bed but listen to a tussling of clothing, running water, brushing, rubber soles on hardwood, the gentle thump of a shutting door. I wake up for the last time today from his late morning text. "How are you, Leah? How did you sleep? Let's go for dinner this evening? I'll be back at the apartment by 7. The day is full of promise. Oh, and I decided last minute to go spend Christmas with my family in Verona. I leave tomorrow morning, so I will pack before dinner. Of course, I will leave the place to you for as long as you bug." The day is saturated in old news. Alessio never breaks a sweat. He will leave effortlessly, and the last piece of tissue fastening me into the body will tear. I am the heart, and I am alive, and I will be free. Yet I do not want to be free of him. I feel where the tissue is beginning to rip, where my heart will burst out, and I put my hand to the side of my neck to cover the site. I want to lock him in, and I want to lock out the air. There will be no potential. I'm nearly alone.
That was Laura James reading Stuck. Laura is a New Jersey native, artist, and has been a lifelong poet ever since her elementary school teacher told her she had a distinct voice. She left the Garden State to study journalism at the City College of New York and to work in Manhattan's Michelin star restaurants. In her years as a New Yorker, she picked up bedbugs, vegetarianism, and impatience. Laura currently lives in the sunny and slow south of Spain, where she creates, teaches English, and takes more analog photos than her budget allows. For several months after relocating, she was asked time and time again if she was in a rush. After a while, she either learned to take it easy or to appear as if she is. Rather than impatience, Laura now grows sourdough and plants. Laura, welcome. I am so pleased to have you on the StoryWorks reading series.
I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. This piece is actually the beginning of a novel based on your life experience. So can you tell us the story behind the story? How is this connected to your life?
Yeah, so the story, Stuck, is semi-autobiographical. Well, when I first started to write this book, it was nonfiction. And the book was also a completely different book at that point. I started writing all of these essays about love in my life, and I thought up this crazy and confusing way to string them all together into a current timeline. And then I improved upon that idea. I cleaned things up. I focused on the current timeline, which became the story of Leah and Nico, who we will meet in later chapters. And then I began to write on them. And I decided to stop limiting myself to what I knew, because there was so much I didn't know, and I wanted to write about all that stuff too. So I kept going like that, and with all of these exaggerations and tangents, and it kind of became impossible to continue calling it nonfiction. So now I guess there are traces of truth on every page, but you kind of have to miss it out. So those that know me, know my sense, will probably do a better job of it than others.
Right. Yeah. I love that this started as nonfiction and then you moved into fiction. I think a lot of us writers start with something we know, not, and then find that we need to go beyond it. We want to expand the boundaries of the story we're telling to create something perhaps more compelling than what we've experienced. Not all of us have the stuff of memoir or know how to put our stories into a memoir. Now, I know you do because you're also an essayist and a poet, so creative nonfiction is your thing, but you actually moved to Spain just like Leah. So can you talk a little bit about your transition to Spain? And I know there's a lockdown story connected to this book.
Of course. So I left New York like Leah did because it got a bit dreary and overworked, and I needed a change. I got stuck in a rut. So I moved to the south of Spain. I started teaching English, so you can see some of the connections there. And this book came about after having spent some time in Paris as well. And after we went into a total lockdown here in Spain. So last spring, in mid-March, we went into total lockdown. And that lasted for about 2 months. And maybe 1 month into lockdown, I decided to do something with my time rather than just waste away and try to learn how to knit and things like that. So I started writing, and I set a limit or a goal for myself each day. And that was just 1,000 words. I think most people tend to set some sort of goal for them most days. And so I wouldn't talk to my roommate until I did 1,000 words a day. And like I said, it was about love in all sorts of crazy ways. But a book came out of it. In the end, after a month, I was doing more than 1,000 words a day towards the end because I just was snowball affecting. I couldn't stop. It got a little crazy. And I ended that spring with 70,000 words, a manuscript of sorts. It was super messy. I kept working on it and still am working on it. So I'm here today with a completely different book. But the lockdown of Spain, being in Europe, was definitely integral to writing this book in every way.
Yeah, it sounds fortuitous in a way as an artist, especially as a writer. I know so many of us feel that our writing is, limited by time constraints, by all of the other responsibilities that we have put on us. Are you finding it's easy to continue your productivity with this manuscript now that life is back to more of a normal state than total lockdown?
Yeah, so it's been really hard, in honesty. After things opened up last spring, of course, we missed the beach. We missed going out for tapas and everything. So we were out all the time, and I was just sitting on the beach doing nothing for hours every day, not thinking about the book and etc. And then I went to Italy for the summer, and my plan was just to sit down there and work and really do not much else. And that was also turned out to be quite a distracting place to be. Then I came back to Spain for work and more of the same. And I don't know, I don't think enough people really talk about how difficult it is to get started. Like once you get started on a project again or revisit a project and you set a certain schedule for yourself or goals, it's easier, but you have to follow it. And at the time I had really no interest in setting a schedule because I was just enjoying my life, and that also felt really nice. So why work when I didn't feel the need to? And so I put really no pressure on myself until the beginning of this year. And I felt like it was about time to revisit it, open it back up and see how it felt. And it feels really good. But also January, February was, it's still hard to get back into a project. And only recently in the last month do I feel super motivated. And I don't know, I think that's also important to share, that you're not going to feel good all the time. And I love writing, but I don't want to write every day. Sometimes I do just want to lie on the beach and do nothing. So it's a struggle.
Right. It is. Yeah. And I'm glad that you said that, because I know whenever somebody says, oh yeah, I wrote 70,000 words in a month or two, there are a lot of writers going, what? Yeah. Out comes the envy. And that's such a wonderful thing to happen. But what really stands out to me is the consistency that you had, setting that goal of 1,000 words a day and being present for the story. And I know from my experience too, if I'm consistent, that's often the most important piece to my productivity, because then my mind stays in the story, stays with the characters, and I'm not getting ungrounded and trying to re-ground myself when I come back. Are there any other sort of lessons or words of wisdom that you have from your experience, kind of lockdown and post-lockdown, and reconnecting with your own work?
So the best thing for me was to work a little bit before bed. Mostly my mornings are my most productive time. And so I would get the meat of my work done in the morning. And then just reading some chapters before bed to keep it fresh in my head. And then, the process of falling asleep and all this lucid kind of thinking and then going into dreaming really helps the process of writing my book and thinking about my characters as I slept. And I was kind of crazy. Like during quarantine, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I had a notebook next to my bed and I would scribble random things in it and wake up the next morning and couldn't read half of it, but some of it was actually pretty good and actually went into my chapters the next morning. So it was super helpful for me just to read a chapter before bed. I
love that. I think I'm going to start doing that. That's great. Yeah. I like to write first thing in the morning, and the idea of kind of priming the subconscious mind as you fall asleep is brilliant. I'm gonna take that up.
Try to be productive all hours of the day, even when you're unconscious.
Yes. Yeah. No kidding. This piece has such a distinct voice. It's one of the first things that really drew me to it. And so when I saw your bio, I thought it was funny that your elementary school teacher told you that. You've been hearing you have a distinct voice your whole life, apparently. Yeah. How would you describe your voice? Is it something you have to work at to craft, or does it just flow through your personality?
I think it's just, I don't know. I don't think it's crafted at all. I think it's just honestly my thought put onto page. And then, yes, of course, I have to craft that into being something that would make sense to other people, because at all times is not that way. But I don't know. I've always just tried to be no other than myself. If I'm writing essays or really trying to get into the mindset of a character and just being honestly that character as I write. I don't really much like writing from what is it, like an omnipresence or
the omniscient.
I forget what that is. perspective is called.
Right, omniscient.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't know all of the craft things, and I've never really taken any writing classes or practiced from any other professionals in the industry. And these are things that I would like to do, but I don't feel like I have been so heavily influenced in my voice from outside forces, which is a nice thing, but also maybe it could be limiting in the future and something I should consider opening myself up to being more, absorbing more of craft.
Yeah, voice is one of those ephemeral things that so many writers struggle to understand, to get a handle on. So I think it's fantastic that your voice just comes naturally and maybe is so distinct because it's unschooled, because there's no sense of mimicry happening there. And, I think if there's something writers could take away, it's the authenticity piece, being true to yourself, being true to your character, and finding that element or allowing that element to flow. I don't know, is there anything you would add to that or change about what I just said?
Yeah, I hope that's true, because that's all I can really do, or I can do more, but I don't want to. Particularly, I like just being honest and speaking the way I prefer to speak.
Yeah. What challenges did you find writing this chapter, and how did you address those?
So one of the biggest challenges when I'm writing is to not make everything a thought piece, and to bring actual action into a piece, and to make the characters do things. And I don't know, the way I tend to write is everything happens in here, and there's not much on the street or not much in the airport. And I have to find a balance and remember that other people don't always like that, or it doesn't make much sense. And I don't know, I think that it has been really good practice for me to incorporate physicality into the experience, because everything physically happening around Leah also affects her greatly mentally and contributes to her next thought. So the world inside her head is not apart from her physical world. So it's important for me to practice bringing both elements together and making a real story, a believable story that's not just inside someone's head.
And I love how as Leah moves through Paris, going from the airport onto the city streets and then to Alessio's apartment building, we get a sense of the city. We have a characterization of Paris, if not quite Paris, as a character. And through her thoughts and through her emotions, we also get a sense of New York City and also Almeria. I'm guessing that as both a visual artist and as a writer, you have finally honed powers of observation, which seems to be a trait Leah shares with you. Could you talk about how you see place as an artist and how you bring it to bear on your stories, how it functions within a story?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess when I see place, I see more of its effect. So how it is affecting the people, or how it is affecting the character. Or if I'm out on the street, I think I tend to be more self-aware of if there's a puddle that smells bad, how am I affected in that moment from it, not just how it is. So I'm always thinking maybe about the next step. And I think it's super helpful sometimes in writing to be super aware of the character and how everything in Paris or everything in Spain or New York could affect Leah, and what she will do next because of her surroundings, because of the bus being overcrowded or the neon lights coming down on everything. How does that make her feel? And does it make her feel at home? Does it make her feel uncomfortable or exposed or vulnerable? And I think a lot of the visuals, a lot of the sensory experiences can also just be opportunity to learn about inner conflict and vice versa. But also sometimes things are just pretty the way they are. So taking a second to just think about the neon lights of Paris can be beautiful in and of itself, and just getting stuck in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. That's brilliant. Where often writers need to be reminded to pull in sensory details, and sometimes they're there just because they are beautiful. They evoke something, they add to the setting and enrich the experience. But we also have this opportunity to use them as more than that, and to use them to further develop the interior life of our character. That's fantastic. Part of Leah's power of observation comes through in the humor. She's got a dry wit. She remarks on herself, on others, on places. And, again, I'm curious, is this something you have to work to craft?
I suppose not. I've read this to some people now, and they say that Leah is funny, and I guess I was aware of that to some extent when I was writing for her, but I didn't really realize that people would pick up so much on her humor, that they would come away first saying that she was funny, second saying that she doesn't seem to care about anything, and third, just entirely, apathetic. I'm actually surprised that people took her humor so well, that it was apparent. I do think she's funny, going back on it, I can see that, but it was not something that I really had to work on either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely enjoy the wit in this chapter. And you mentioned people think she's apathetic. Do you find her apathetic? Is that how you wrote her? Or does that reaction surprise you?
No, that one doesn't surprise me. I mean, she says things like, oh, I don't mind, I don't care, like whatever is okay with her. And maybe that's a surface level apathy. It's what she gives and what she puts out. And maybe there's a lot more care that you will learn about, that the readers will learn about, and she will learn about. But that's definitely what she puts off, is this apathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I definitely think there's more. I never would have said that she's apathetic. She's running away from something, and she's got this pretense of not caring. And yet, through her observations and through the sensory input and the way she, imbibes the world around her, I have the sense that she is actually deeply feeling, but she might be trying to deaden some of that feeling, so apathetic is not a quality that I would apply to Leah, which is interesting because we hear so much about the importance of opening hooks. And of course, they are critical, because if you don't entice your reader to keep reading your story, you lose them. You don't have a reader. And I think if Leah was truly apathetic, or if she had struck me as apathetic, I wouldn't have wanted to continue on the journey with her. But I did care about her. I wanted to know more about Leah, about her movement through Paris, the little snippets of backstory that we're filling in, who she is, and where she comes from. And then, of course, this question of Alessio, would she get there? Will she get to this apartment? Will Alessio be there? And I think this chapter is such a great reminder that quiet tension works just as well as big explosive tension. We don't need massive action to get a reader to commit to a story. So were you concerned about whether a reader would say yes to Leah and this walk through the streets of Paris toward Alessio's apartment? Was that something you had to struggle with or revise much as you were writing this?
Yeah, so when I first wrote this. And when I really first wrote the book alone, I wasn't concerned about this stuff at all, whether things were too mental or internal, because that's how I liked it. And I was plenty entertained by it. So I was like, sure, other people will be entertained by this too. It's not happening. But then, I started sharing some ideas and people were like, but what happened? And I'm like, oh, is that important? Okay, I'm going to take that into mind. What does happen? And so then I did start putting in, a little more action, a little more plot. And I think it has really, it's an absorption that I'm glad that I took, because it really has honed in on the internal as well, and just makes everything more entertaining for myself, for the readers, I hope. But yeah, it was something I was not worried about. And then later with conferring with others, then I was a little bit worried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's how so many of us write. You begin a story for yourself, and then at some point you decide you want to put it out into the world. And these questions of how people respond to it come into play. Now, Leah has this moment on the streets of Paris where she's imagining herself as the heart. And you have this beautiful description of her fantasy and the connective tissue. Could you talk a little bit about that fantasy? It comes up again at the very end in the final paragraph. You kind of echo that fantasy of being the heart again. So it's clearly important and thematic. So could you talk about it as it relates to Leah and the story?
Yeah, of course. I think that there's a lot in there. There's a lot in that fantasy. And to start, it's about her needing this disconnect of sorts. She kind of wants it. She is the heart. She sees herself as a heart, and she's part of this body, which is the world around her. And she sees herself disconnecting slowly. All of the tissue that's connecting is vanishing, it's going away, and soon she will be alone. And she's thinking about it, but it's not like she's so afraid of it happening. She's not like, oh no, this is happening, I'm dreading this. She's actually like, well, that sounds kind of great, I won't have to pump blood anymore. I'll be on my own, and I just won't have to think about anything. And so there's something you can obviously learn about Leah there, that she doesn't mind isolation. But then, of course, there's this exception in the chapter of Alessio, because she doesn't want to lose him either. So she wants to be alone, but does she really want to be alone? Does she know? She doesn't. Okay. Yeah. And then there's another portion to it of just these fantasies in general, and how she sees herself in the fantasy versus how she actually is. So this fantasy of her being the heart, she is literally an organ. She's walking through the streets of Paris and she doesn't see Leah. She doesn't see her body, her face. She sees a heart. So she's just this organ, and she doesn't see herself as she actually is. And maybe she would prefer to be otherwise. She would prefer to not be this body that she was given, or this mind that she was given or placed in the streets of Paris. And this will continue to happen, like who she wants to be in these fantasies versus how other people perceive her. And even if that's a heart, it sounds better to her than anything else.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting that, on the one hand, we would think of her disassociating from her face, from her body, from her personality, which is really a sort of rejection of the self and of the self in the world. But then she fantasizes that she's the heart of the world, and the heart is the organ of our emotional center, and sort of the core of the body. And so in that sense, her fantasy is placing her at the heart of the world and of all that is around her. That's a really interesting paradox. Was that intentional?
Yeah. Also because there's a lot of subconscious guilt that comes along with being the center of things, the thing that people depend on. And so maybe she does feel a bit too dependent on and that this world is depending on her and she just doesn't want to do the job that people are expecting of her. So that is entirely intentional, and that maybe this guilt will build up and it'll weigh on her in other ways.
Right. So is she running away? Does she have purpose in this movement, or is she really drifting? You know, you have a sense kind of both throughout the narrative, that she's kind of ungrounded and drifting through the world and through her life. But then you also have the sense of almost urgent movement of running away.
Yeah. If anything, I would define it as an urgent drifting. She doesn't really have any sort of clear idea of what that may be, but she knows that she wants to drift and she's purposely doing it, but she doesn't really care where that takes her or how that affects the other people around her, but she just wants to keep going, and she just wants to do whatever she'll do next. And maybe that's even a bit unpredictable for her, and especially unpredictable for those around her. But yeah, I would say drifting, but violently so.
Urgent, violent drifting. I think that's one of those things where people can kind of go, oh yeah, I get that. Like, I've never done it. I would never take that leap, but I kind of get that impulse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope people can pick up on that in a way.
Oh, it's definitely there. There's such a sense of anticipation around meeting Alessio and Leah's reunion with him. And at the end, we, the readers, don't even get to see him. You know, he promises her that dinner before he flies away. But that anticipation is so disappointing. I feel horrible for Leah when she gets that text, and it's even a cruelty. You know, Alessio is oblivious to it, but it's a kind of cruelty. And then once we know he's out the door, you know, that he's flying away, he just ceases to matter. All of my concern for him, all of my investment in the chapter, in the story, is only in Leah. You know, it's like the anticipation of meeting Alessio and seeing their reunion is so quickly and instantly deflated that the only thing I'm left to care about is Leah herself. Did you always know that he was going to disappoint her like that?
Yeah, I knew it. I was setting her up for such disappointment, and she was setting herself up. And I think, I don't know, I feel like subconsciously she knows that she is expecting too much. Maybe not to the extent that he let her down. No one could really expect that, but she had it in the back of her mind that maybe Alessio was not someone to be fully trusted. And maybe the reader could pick up on that in a few places and learn more about Alessio in the way that he left a note for Leah at the apartment saying, "I'll be home late," but he must have left that note before he went to work, and he only texted her saying he would be home late after she left the airport. Like, he doesn't give warning, but he already had these plans in his head, and saying that, like, he already wrote in the note that he wasn't going to stay, but he didn't tell her that till last minute via text. So he's just being completely inconsiderate, or maybe a little bit afraid of Leah, like maybe afraid of what she wants and doesn't know how to be open with her. And so Leah had to have picked up on that in some way, but she's still expecting, and she's still in this fantasy reality of what she wants from Alessio and what she wants them to have together. And so she is looking for the good in him and looking for places where she can redeem him. And she finds them, even though maybe he does not deserve that.
No, at the end, he sure does. And at the end, that was definitely a jerk move. And you leave us with this final paragraph. Would you care to read it again for us? Just "the day is saturated," that final paragraph.
Yeah. Absolutely. The day is saturated in old news. Alessio never breaks a sweat. He will leave effortlessly, and the last piece of tissue fastening me into the body will tear. I am the heart, and I am alive, and I will be free. Yet I do not want to be free of him. I feel where the tissue is beginning to rip, where my heart will burst out. I put my hand to the side of my neck to cover the sight. I want to lock him in, and I want to lock out the air. There will be no potential. I'm nearly alone.
I feel like Leah is coming unmoored as she confronts this disappointment in Alessio. And yet, I don't know, it's such an ambiguous ending. You know, if we think of this as a standalone, as a short story, the way it's being presented here on the reading series, then it leaves it for the reader to make up her own mind. You know, is Leah going to be okay? Where do you think this leaves Leah? And what would you hope the reader takes away from this?
Well, I think in a way she's telling the reader what's going to happen. She says, I'm nearly alone in the body. As soon as Alessio leaves, then it's just me. And then the reader can very much expect to just be in Leah's world, you know, for at least for a little while. And what that will mean, what you will learn about Leah is to be determined, but she's telling you what to expect. She will end up alone very soon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a poignancy to that. I think the power of story is that we relate it to our own experiences. And even if we haven't had the same or very similar experiences, we can relate to the emotional core of the character's experience. And so I feel left. You know, I feel nearly alone, like you have to settle into this new state of being, a state of being where you don't have Alessio at the end of the road, or where you don't have, you know, the romance, the hoped for partnership, the beautiful plants on the peninsula that don't know whether to photosynthesize to the windows or to the couple, you know. Such great imagery there. Well, Laura, I am certainly excited to see more of your writing coming out in our world. It has been such a pleasure to speak with you about Stuck today.
Yes, I'm so glad that we met, and I'm so glad to have had this opportunity to be here with you. It's so exciting and so fun for me. So thank you for having me on.
We will link to Laura's website on our show site, StoryWorksPodcast.com, or you can go directly to laurajames.info. Also follow her on Instagram, being a visual artist. She's got a lot of great photography and other cool stuff, so check her out. Thank you so much for listening to today's StoryWorks reading series. We'll be back next month with a new short story or essay read by the author, followed by a conversation about craft, process, and inspiration.